I'd like to just take a moment to anchor the space for what I'm going to be talking about. So let us close our eyes. And just take a few deep breaths and bring yourself to your center. Just letting everything go that's happened before and that's coming later. Just letting yourself come into presence in the now. And see if you can find that place inside yourself where you can just be in silence and in a place of receiving in the now. And I'd like to welcome the guardians of the crystalline cities of light. And we ask you to anchor around and through this space for the duration of my talks today. The crystalline pillars of light and sacred geometry of the Dolphin Star Temple for healing, releasing of illusion, awakening to divine truth, and for the beautiful male-female balance that we are in the process of restoring on the earth. And also aligning this temple with our mastery and ascension plan. And we ask the Dolphin Star Temple Higher Council of Light, the Pleiadian, Syrian, and Andromedan emissaries of light. And for this morning's presentation, a special group called the Divine Couples of the Seven Rays. We ask you, the Divine Couples of the Seven Rays, to come and create a circle around this room and hold us in your loving presence and in your male-female balance. And we dedicate this space to being a room called love. And so be it. And you can open your eyes and come back or keep them closed, whichever you prefer. Yesterday, when I was bringing in, day before yesterday, when I was bringing in Kuan Yin and Lord Maitreya, they said that they wanted me to tell a little story of something that happened with them back in the late 80s. And basically, in the late 1980s, I was getting involved with a man, and I was here in Mount Shasta. And as we went into lovemaking, Kuan Yin and Lord Maitreya came into the room with us. And I recognized Kuan Yin instantly, but I didn't know who Lord Maitreya was at the time, and it was 2 weeks later before I saw a picture of him and figured out who it was. But what they told me was that in the year 2012, when the planetary changeover happens, that the Lord Buddha is going to be stepping back from holding the seat of the Buddha, and he's going to be holding a larger place within the whole galaxy. And that Kuan Yin and Lord Maitreya would at that time be stepping in to hold the seat of the Buddha together. And they said that it would never again be held by just a male or just a female. That it would always be held by two, a male and a female. Because the time for the men and the women to live in balance was now. And it's been a very, very, very long time on the earth since we really had a time of total balance. There was a time during Lemuria when the male-female lived in a place of balance and harmony. And when the understandings about what sacred sex was something that was well known by people. But the time is coming again where we need to return to that and coming to completion with the times when we were in matriarchy, and of course we've been in patriarchy for many, many years now. And what I want to say is that Lord Maitreya and Kuan Yin told me when they came in that in order for them to hold the seat of the Buddha, they needed a certain number of couples here on the planet who could hold that male-female balance within their life with each other and also individuals who could hold that male-female balance in themselves. And what they explained is that when the higher dimensional beings want to bring an energy in, they have to have a certain number of people on the earth who are already capable of holding that energy for them to be able to hold it on a higher dimensional and us be able to receive it. So they explained the role of the human being in the divine plan. And that's why so many of us chose to come to the earth and hold that energy and heal those issues at this time, because we knew that they would be needed. And as they were sharing this to us after the lovemaking, it felt so right. And I made an immediate volunteering to be one of those people who was working in that direction. And I have to say, some of the things that have happened in relationships since then have certainly been my teaching and healing experiences. But I also have learned what it really means to hold that male-female balance. And in this time frame, there is a special energy being given for us also to realign with the great central sun and the divine source of all that is. And the Holy Mother and Holy Father live in the great central sun, so to speak. And we're going to be doing an activation after lunch to deepen that connection with the great central sun through the photon band. And it's an activation that came through for the planet on this March equinox. So for now, I want to work with the energies of the divine couples of the 7 rays and talk about what it really means to heal the male-female balance. Now, I've written 4 books, and the second book that I wrote is called the Pleiadian Tantric Workbook, Awakening Your Divine Ba. Ba is an ancient Egyptian word that means the soul. And what the Tantric Workbook is helping us understand is that Tantric sexuality is the route to awakening our souls to their full presence. You see, when we make love, the female receives through the vaginal area, and the energy coming in from her partner goes all the way up into the soul matrix, which is just above the heart chakra. So the energy that the man brings to the lovemaking goes directly into the woman's soul. And it's intended to be an energy of honoring, devotion, love, and awe at the beauty of the goddess. And the woman is intended to welcome a man to her bed, to that sexual experience, also from that same quality. But for the man and woman to come together in that way, there has to be total trust in one another. For the woman to be able to open herself sexually, to receiving the man into herself in that deep way, spiritually, she is the Holy Grail. And it's like he is the sword of truth. And the sword of truth can never harm anything that is divine. And the Holy Grail is the purity of the feminine goddess energy when she's aligned with her true self. So when the female is in her true essence and the male is in his true essence, they hold that energy balance. So that when the woman is penetrated by the man, if she has that total trust in his intention, it's like similar to like a, I'm losing the word, like a little portal inside of her. And when that portal opens, it starts to take her into a higher energy frequency and a higher dimensional alignment. And it welcomes him to come into that alignment and join her in that deep connection. It's really beautiful. And I have had a tantric relationship at one time. And when that would happen, that vortex would open, Sometimes I would experience myself as if I was becoming the whole universe. But it wasn't like having a vision or a thought about something. I would literally feel myself as if I was the whole universe. All of the planets, the stars, the galaxies. I felt that I became those things. And I could feel my partner's love coming into that galaxy and bringing it to life. Because you see, the way our system is created, we have the physical, and we have the feminine that's receptive. We have the generative energy of the male, which is pure electric light. And when those two things come together, it brings life. So literally, the orbital patterns of our universe, of our planet, are created by this energy of Holy Mother and Holy Father moving in and out of union. I had an experience many years ago where I was told by my guides that they wanted me to do some regression work and go back to the origins of my consciousness. Where was I first conceived in existence? And in the process of doing that, I was taken back to prior to my own conception. And what I experienced was as if all of existence was in oneness, and it was like it was in a deep sleep. And there was a point within this where suddenly the quote-unquote, the sleeper, the God presence, became aware of its existence, and it woke up. And it became aware of itself as the dreamer and as the dream. And then it went back into the dream and back out into being the dreamer again, and went into just sheer ecstasy about having that experience. But there was a time when the dreamer and the dream remained as individuations, when the dreamer awakened to its own presence, and it looked back at itself. And it was as if the Holy Father and Holy Mother were born at that time in their awareness. Because when the dreamer looked at the one who was dreaming, the awe and wonder and love was instant. And when that awe and love and wonder became instant, they merged into oneness in a whole new way. So that while the dreaming was happening, the dreamer was aware of the dreaming at the same time. So it was as if all of existence experienced a lucid dream. And when they were in that lucid dream for quite a while, then they individuated again and began to recognize the uniqueness of each other. And that was the birth of the Holy Mother and Holy Father. And what the Holy Mother and Holy Father have shared with me is that we're meant to come together in that same innocence as they did that very first time and still do. We're meant to come together in sacred union, in awe and wonder, in innocence and total adoration, and in enthusiastic delight that the other exists. Our partners are meant to be, for the women, they're meant to be your male God presence. For the men, the woman is supposed to be your female goddess presence. So that we are enacting this role of the Holy Mother and Holy Father, but each in our own unique way. And isn't that beautiful to think about? But I want to say something. Some people think that if you give up normal sex and move into Tantra that you lose something. I'll tell you something. You not only don't lose something, but you gain so much more. There's nothing lost in the sense of the pleasure in the body. But what is gained is the union of body and spirit in oneness during that act. And the body still has awesome experiences. And when that spiritual awakening comes and the female goes into that altered state experience, welcoming the man into it, it's one of the deepest activations that each of them can ever have. It doesn't mean you have to be in a sexual tantric relationship in order to become fully awakened, but it is one of the ways of moving into that that's really beautiful. And at this time on our earth, it's also still been one of the most challenging for a lot of people. But some of us are moving past that challenge, where we've meditated and worked on ourselves enough that we have our frequencies up and we know how to trust. At this time frame, in terms of setting up a relationship with someone that you can have that with, it needs to be with someone that when you look at them, you know that that person lives with divine intention to do what is impeccable. Impeccability is when you always choose to do what you know is the right thing. And there is a point in your evolution where you come, where doing what you know is the right thing, what is in impeccability, it's almost like you feel you have no other choice because your delight and your determination take you in that direction. But a discipline to live in impeccability is a starting point for even having a potential for creating a sacred relationship. Because when you're with that person, what you need to be able to see when you look at them is someone that you know in every situation has a genuine intention of being 100% honest, 100% forthright, and being as impeccable as they are aware of being in that moment. And it doesn't mean that they may not sometimes make a mistake, but it does mean that when they recognize what that mistake is about, that they instantly choose to change it, that they don't go into the defensiveness of ego. They don't go into the trying to find an excuse for it. They humbly acknowledge and they begin to shift something inside themselves to take themselves to a next higher level. Now, when two people who can live in that way come together, they can learn to trust that even if they sometimes make mistakes, that they can trust each other to correct those mistakes as soon as they're aware of it. And they can trust that in the divine plan, that every human being has a divine plan for total enlightenment, mastery, and eventually for ascension. And if people aren't in a place yet within their evolution where they can live in this level of doing what's right in each and every situation, then you can still love and honor them and know that they will get there because they have their own divine plan. And we don't need to judge them, and we don't need to hold on to distrust, which is kind of a tight, contracted energy. But we need to learn to use discernment in what we're choosing in our relationships. And in order to have a relationship that can become a sacred union, we need to live together as helpmates. And what it means to be a helpmate with another person is that in every situation that that person is going through, that you choose to give them your assistance in any way that they need it. It means that when they're doing something that you don't like, that you can acknowledge that you don't like it without trashing them and blaming them for it. That you've learned how to work with the person on the issues instead of coming against each other. You know, most people come into relationship trying to change somebody. We all want somebody to be that person that we've always wished we could be with. And so we come into relationship, and some people subtly and some people not so subtly try to change that person into what you think they're supposed to be for you to finally be able to be happy. But what you need to recognize is you need to find a person who's already good enough for you to be happy with them, even while they're still changing. It's not our job to change people because we don't know what someone else is supposed to be. If you have ideas in your head that you understand what every person is supposed to be, then there's a level where you haven't even begun to evolve yet. Because none of us is capable of knowing what the full awakening of the other person is meant to be. And each person has a unique essence of their own, and they have a unique path of their own. For us to presume that we know who they're supposed to be on that path is very arrogant. Because we only know what's right for us in our hearts. We have to be able to be with someone that we trust, can tune into their own hearts and know what's right for them and make the right choices. So that means that in coming together with a partner, we have to stop playing what I call the lust seduction game. And the lust seduction game is the game where you come together with somebody and all of the sexual energies kind of dancing around, and one of the partners, usually the woman, is playing the seductress, and the man is playing the lust game of he wants to be the macho man and take her and show her that he's a man, and I think most of us are beyond that. But if you're not 100% beyond it, it's time to shift that game, because the lust seduction game doesn't serve anyone. It plays opposites against opposites. It plays the man as the grabber. It plays the woman as the one who gets her ego off on being wanted in that lustful way. And it doesn't really serve anybody. It just ends up being a competition to see who's best. So in bringing that lust seduction game to a stop, it means that we have to start learning how to feel the energy of that person and what our connection is to them. And what do we want with that person? It doesn't mean there's no sexual charge. There may be and there may not be in the beginning. But it means that we learn to tune in on a deeper level. And it means you don't instantly jump into bed as soon as you meet them to relieve that sexual charge. You get to know more about who they are first. And if you start to feel like that's a person you really want to be involved with, then it's time to have a sort of an interview type of talk. And in this interview talk, you talk about what you've done in other relationships, the mistakes you've made, the way you want to change it. You talk about the things that you absolutely have to have in a relationship with the person. Things like honesty, nonviolence, whatever the basics are. The things that you know that you must have in order to be with someone. You need someone who will listen to you. You need someone who will communicate with you about important things. So you need to talk about all these things and see what the other person has to say. Because if they can't give input to the conversation, it's probably not the right person. I remember at one point getting into a relationship, and I did the talking to them about all the things I needed and wanted in the relationship and who I was and what I would do, and they kept saying, yeah, that sounds great, that's what I want too. But they didn't add anything of their own to it. And later on, I began to recognize they did think that what I said was a good idea, but they were nowhere near ready for that. So you need to make sure that the other person gives input to this conversation. And once you see that you're both on the same track, that your goals align, what you want to do in life, where you want to live, and those things align, then that's the time for moving deeper into the sexual. And if you go through some sexual frustration in the meantime, you can work with my tantric workbook, which tells you how to move your own energy tantrically. Because it's ideal to work with moving the energy tantrically by yourself before you do it with a partner. So basically, this idea of coming into a male-female equality is a time where neither person ever has to wait for the other person to give them permission on anything. If you're in a right relationship, both people are sovereign, meaning that they are the master of their own lives. And that means if that person wants to do something, they tell you what they're going to do, and you may have a talk about how that works into your lifestyle, but it doesn't mean that you have to give permission. I know when I was in Japan, the women often say things like, well, my husband's not really into the spiritual, but he let me come to the workshop. You know? They talk in that way a lot. And I've heard people in this country say the same thing, not as much as in Japan. But it's like, if you think you have to get your partner's permission, then you need to look either at yourself and how you give your power away, or who is your partner in the way of control. And you need to start working on changing those things.